Hey everybody, and welcome to today's episode where we're going to be breaking down the UFC 252 main card, which is headlined by Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. And this is a rubber match, and in my eyes, and I think in a lot of people's eyes, this is probably going to determine the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know when you look at their body of work, there's people like Fedor, but I think when you're talking about in terms of just the two baddest motherfuckers that ever lived, these are the guys right here. And DC obviously won the first matchup via knockout, and then Stipe knocked Daniel Cormier out in the rematch in the fourth round, right? So a lot on the line in this one, and it's likely going to be Daniel Cormier's last fight. But we're going to work from the bottom of the card to the top to break this thing down. And also something notable that happened on this card and kind of disappointing is Ion Cutelaba versus Magomed Ankalaev is going to get rescheduled. Cutelaba tested positive for COVID-19, and this is a bout that's been rescheduled a couple times now, and I think it's most likely, I think I read on MMA Junkie, it's going to get moved to August 29th. But in the first fight, the reason the rematch is so interesting is because in the first fight, it got called off early, right? Because Ion Cutelaba was kind of faking, like he was getting knocked out, like playing possum a little bit, right? And the referee called a stop to it. It's you're not in there, right? And it's hard to lay too much criticism on the referees, but you could see that, and don't get me wrong, Cutelaba, anytime you play that game, you are almost, you're presenting the possibility that the ref might step in and stop the fight, right? Like you're opening that door up. But he was returning fire. His legs were clearly underneath him. He didn't look like he was actually, in danger of getting knocked down or anything. And I think the ref made a mistake in that fight. But my point is I'm excited to see the rematch, right? Because Magomed was finding success early, but you know that Cutelaba has a ton of power, and you've seen both guys throw like some pretty wild shit, and they both got pretty good wrestling. It was a great matchup, and it's just a bummer that it's going to get moved to the 29th card. Anyway, the fight that I believe, according to ESPN, if their website's correct, the fight that's going to replace it is Herbert Burns versus Daniel Pineda. And, I mean, it's a good fight, man. It's just it's not the same matchup, right? It's not as exciting to me, and I think Herbert Burns is going to be a little bit of a favorite, but we'll get to that. The first fight on the main card, though, is going to be between John Dodson and Merab Dvalishvili in a bantamweight matchup. Now, this one's confusing to me when you look at the odds, right? Like I'm on ESPN right now, and it says that John Dodson is a plus 185 underdog. That's surprising if you consider A, his experience, B, the level of competition that he's faced, and C, he just knocked out Nathaniel Wood, who's an up-and-coming contender in that weight class, right? Don't get me wrong. Merab Dvalishvili is very talented, and I'm not saying that he can't win this fight. I'm just saying that the biggest name on his record so far that he's fought, I think the biggest name he fought might be Ricky Simone. I really do, and he lost that fight via submission in the last round, right? And here's the thing that makes me nervous about Dvalishvili a little bit. And again, guys, he's very good. Everything he does is very technically sound. He's a great striker. He'll throw spinning shit at you. He keeps you guessing on things. He's a hard guy to deal with, and he's proven that throughout his career so far. But I saw a thing today that said that he has like one of the highest takedown rates in the UFC, maybe the highest. I think Curtis Blades posted it on his Instagram. And the thing, every time I see that number, I think that means that you're letting guys back up though, right? And I think that John Dodson is going to be a hard guy to get to, and he's going to be a hard guy to get to the ground initially, but Dodson's going to be good at getting back up to his feet, man. Merab is going to have to, in my opinion, if he wants to win this fight, I think he's got to try to control Dodson and pin him to the ground. Because in my opinion, don't get me wrong, like I said, Merab has very good striking, but I think Dodson is going to have a significant speed advantage. And Dodson also likes to implement a lot of movement into his game plan, right? And he does a great job of getting off the center line and throwing that left hand. Right? He's a southpaw. And one of the most interesting aspects of this fight to me is going to be that southpaw versus orthodox matchup, especially because the single leg is going to be readily available for Merab. And he loves getting the single leg, elevating, and then going for the inside trip, right? He hits that takedown all the time. But at the same time, Dodson when he's fighting orthodox fighters, and you saw this in the Nathaniel Wood fight and just throughout his career. He's very good at firing shots right down the middle, and then he'll move off the center line as well, right? Like he'll get an angle on you and he'll land shots that hurt you with that, and he'll throw that left hand multiple times, man. Like it's coming fast. And when it lands, it hurts because he's explosive. So he'll throw it as he's moving off the center line, get a good angle, connect, and then he'll stagger you, and then he'll just kind of blitz you, right? He's very good with the left hand, and I think that, again, the movement, and Merab has good cardio, right? He definitely does, but I just think going up against a veteran, I'm not going to lie, guys, I kind of like the underdog in this one. I think it's a winnable fight for Merab, but I think that Merab is going to have to he's going to have to utilize forward pressure, and when he gets his takedowns, he's going to have to keep him on the ground. You might see a little bit of a more diverse arsenal in terms of striking from Merab, but I just like I said, I just like the fact that Dodson's a vet and that he's a solid striker himself, and I think he'll have an advantage in the hand speed department. We'll see, though. It's a good matchup and a big fight for Merab Dvalishvili. If he can beat a guy like John Dodson, that's going to definitely get a number beside his name, and you'll start talking about some of the guys that he needs to fight towards the top, like I'd say like 10 to 12 of that weight class after this. Maybe even top 10, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, next up is Herbert Burns versus Daniel Pineda. And Herbert Burns is the younger brother of Gilbert Burns, who is on a tear right now at 170 pounds, just beat the shit out of Tyron Woodley. And very talented, man. And Herbert's looked great throughout his career, right? Daniel Pineda is a guy who's a real veteran in the sport. He's 26-13. He's bounced around from different organizations. I think he's been in Bellator, Legacy, he got out of PFL most recently, and he even had a stint in the UFC back in the day where he fought, I believe, Diego Brandao. I think he lost to Diego Brandao, lost to Mike Brown, some notable names like that, but he went 3-4 in the UFC, right? And he's coming off of 2 losses. Well, they're no contests. They were originally wins for him, where they got overturned because he tested positive for a banned substance. I just saw that Cutelaba was off the card and that this fight was replacing it. So I just saw it like last night or maybe this morning, but so I haven't had a ton of time to do a lot of research on this guy, right? But like I haven't had, go back and watch a lot of his fights because I haven't seen him fight in a while. But I would imagine that, and I know Pineda is a black belt, and I know that he's got 18 submissions on his record, right? I just think when you're going up against a guy like Herbert Burns, you'll probably see Pineda look good early in the transitions and stuff, and you'll be like, oh, he's giving Herbert a little bit of trouble here, and he's escaping there, right? And he's doing this, and it's looking pretty competitive. But I think as the fight wears on, and as these like jiu-jitsu and grappling exchanges start to play out and get extended, that's where you're going to see Herbert start to take over. I think it'll take him a little bit, but I think Herbert's going to win this fight in the second or third round via submission. I think it'll take him a while to kind of get Pineda where he needs him. But I think that this is inevitably going to end up going to the ground. Well, sometimes when 2 guys like this who are specialists end up standing on the feet, you get this war, like this stand-up war. Like I kind of thought when Usman and Covington fought, for example, both really good wrestlers, I thought you'd see some more grappling exchanges. And I think people were weirdly kind of looking forward to that in that fight, right? But they just ended up having a kickboxing match basically for 5 rounds. So who knows? But I would imagine that at some point they're going to get into some grappling exchanges. And I think Herbert Burns will have an advantage there. I think his jiu-jitsu is more solid. And I think you'll see, I think, like I said, I think Pineda will be able to defend things well early if it goes there. But as the fight wears on, I think Burns will just be able to figure it out and secure a submission. All right, moving on to a heavyweight bout between Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And Rozenstruik, man, coming off that brutal knockout loss to Francis Ngannou. And so for me, when I think about this fight, I think the most important thing is where is Jairzinho's head at, right? Because he just got, like I said, brutally knocked out. And you got to think that I don't know how he's going to come out, right? But he might come out a little bit gun shy, like you kind of saw with Ngannou after he fought Stipe when he fought Derek Lewis. You might see him be over ambitious at the same time and kind of looking to exact his revenge, right? I think both of those things when you're coming in on either end of the spectrum, when you're fighting a guy like Junior Dos Santos, both of those are dangerous. Because if you're gun shy, I don't think Junior's going to be, man. I think that Junior's going to go in there and box you. And he's going to have to slow the fight down if he wants to win. But if Jairzinho is in this weird state where he doesn't want to throw because he's afraid of the consequences of getting hit back or something like that, right? That'll play into Junior's hands because he'll start to dig this hole. And he'll just make it harder and harder for Jairzinho to, like, climb himself out of it, right? If he comes in overly ambitious, I mean, don't get me wrong, man. If he tags you, you're going to go to fucking sleep. He hits hard, right? Like, he's going to put you out. But if he comes in overly ambitious or like trying to get revenge or whatever, you know what I mean? It's going to be a problem for him as well because Junior will take advantage of him missing on these things or maybe overextending on little things. And again, this fight to me, it's not like Junior can't knock you out, but this is going to be about Junior's ability to slow the pace down and try to put a fucking paint job on Jairzinho. That's what he has to do. He has to go out and box him technically and sound and stay safe, right? I like Jairzinho in this fight, though. If he comes in the right headspace, okay, and he's intelligent and taking, like, calculated chances and risks, I think he's going to win this fight. I think his power is significant, and it's going to be more overwhelming than Junior Dos Santos's would be. And that's the thing about these big guys, man, is you could be beating a guy up, and you saw this with Jairzinho when he was fighting over him. You could be losing a fight the entire time, right? Or getting, like, outclassed in these, like, when it comes down to technicalities. But when a guy like that lands, he has game-changing power, and you always have to consider that when you're talking about these guys. And I like Jairzinho for that reason. Moving on to the co-main event. This is an exciting one. Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. This is a tough fight to pick because when I think about, like, Chito Vera, I think about a fighter who's good everywhere. I think about a guy who's very sound fundamentally. He's very technically sound. And, you know, he's coming off a fight against a guy like Song Yadong who's super explosive and very capable of knocking you out. And he wasn't afraid to stand there and trade with a guy like that. You know what I mean? So I think you're going to get a really fun fight in this one regardless. I think these guys are going to be willing to stand in front of each other and throw, and they both like to strike. I think that Sean O'Malley has an edge in this fight because of one thing, the creativity. And I just think he has a more diverse striking arsenal than Chito. And don't get me wrong, if Chito applies consistent pressure, right, if he can stay on top of Sean O'Malley and just keep things coming down the pipe, keep a lot of volume coming at him and just stay defensively sound, he'll be good. But O'Malley just has this weird... He's got this, like, aura about him, and he's got this weird way of drawing shit out of people and finding these openings and making them do things, and they're feeding into what he wants, and then he finally fucking connects and ends the show. He's got a weird knack for doing it, and I think that's what makes him so exciting and why people are so hyped up on him is because he's confident and you can see it. I think the first round of this fight is the most important round. I think whoever wins the first round, well, that's not true. I'm picking O'Malley for this reason. Like, okay, if the first round goes in O'Malley's favor, he's like I said, he's so creative and his striking is so diverse that it's going to be hard for Chito to get back up out of that hole. Like, if he gets behind big in the first round, Sean's just going to keep compounding and making the striking more and more complex until he finds the finish, right? If you lose the first round against O'Malley, it's tough. And he's also a very solid jiu-jitsu player, so if you want to engage him in the grappling department to maybe try to save yourself, man, I don't know. He's got solid jiu-jitsu. If Marlon Vera is able to win the first round, though, and especially if he can do so decisively, he might be able to hurt the confidence of O'Malley a little bit. But again, just the diversity in his game and his creativity, I think O'Malley has an easier time digging himself out of a bad first round and winning the second and third, right? I think the key, again, for Chito in this fight is just to stay consistent, stick to what you know, come down, stay technically sound, and just apply solid, calculated pressure on him, right? You can't start engaging and thinking about all these feints and stuff that he's throwing at him too much. You got to kind of implement your own offense against this guy, you know? And I think Chito's the type of guy that's willing to do that, and that's what makes this fight so exciting. I like O'Malley, but it's a close one. I think you're kind of going to get a dogfight here. I think you're going to get a war for 3 rounds. And I think, don't get me wrong, I think they could both finish each other. They're both capable, but I kind of think you're going to see a decision with O'Malley winning like 29. I think it'll go 2 rounds to 1 for O'Malley. We'll see. I don't know. What are the odds that actually fucking happens, right? Probably not very good. Okay, moving on to the main event between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier. And again, we said this at the beginning of the show. This is probably going to determine the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time, in my opinion. And I know that there's like arguments out there for Fedor and guys like that, right? But I'm just talking about, I'm a big believer in like generational skill, right? Like, especially in MMA, because not only are the people who are participating in it getting more athletic, but the game is evolving rapidly at the same time. So I just think that guys today that you're seeing compete are just so much better than the guy. And DC's been around for a while, man, but I just think that he's still very relevant here, right? Like he's still, in my opinion, well, I mean, not even my opinion, right? It's a fact. Like he's one of the best heavyweights in the world. I don't know, man. I just think that when you look at, if you put DC up against Fedor in his prime, I've got a hard time believing DC won't come out on top, man. That's just my opinion. Same with Stipe. I think either of those guys would beat him. I don't know. That's probably going to cause some debate, but that's just my personal opinion. Anyway, it's going to be a great matchup. You know, DC knocks out Stipe in the first fight, and then Stipe exacts his revenge in the second fight by knocking DC out in the 4th round, and he made that great adjustment to start going to the body with the left hook, right? I think that Daniel Cormier, if he comes in and fights his fight, I think he's got a very good chance of beating Stipe. I think his wrestling is the biggest difference maker. And if you look at the first round of the second fight, when DC took Stipe down, Stipe had a hard time getting back up, man. And also, Daniel Cormier has got this really creative way of getting inside where he's fighting a guy in Stipe who has a reach advantage on him, right? But he'll kind of reach out and grab your hands and hand fight with you and then find these shots over the top, right? So he's really good at getting where he needs to be and fighting in that phone booth. Like that's his range. I think the difference though, Stipe is going to be, I think, ready for the take. He's going to know that Daniel is going to be thinking about taking him down in this one, right? So I think DC has to find ways inside, but he's got to do a better job of working the body, especially in this fight. In the first round, he was working the leg kicks in pretty well. And then, like, the second round came around, it just turned into a fucking slugfest. And they were basically, a ton of headshots taken at each other, right? And that's why I think they got so caught up in this battle up top that when DC decided to go to the body, it was like, for all of rounds 2 and 3, basically, DC was coming over the top, like they're headhunting each other, right? And he was in that mindset, and it was almost like it was hard to adjust to the fact that Stipe started going to the body on him. I think that you're going to see both guys be more prepared in this, and the key is going to be Daniel Cormier's ability to get inside. Now, I think that Stipe really has to work the jab a lot in this fight if he wants to stay successful. He can't get into this game where he's hand fighting with DC because DC's going to win that battle. Not that Stipe couldn't land and knock him out, or not that Stipe can't find success there. But if you're getting into this battle where you're letting DC start locking up your hands and coming over top, you're going to lose that. That's his game plan. He does that all the time. That's how he works to get inside. So for you want to stay in my opinion, you want to establish your range. You want to be using your kicks. Front kicks could be used. You got to worry about getting taken down when you throw those, though. But even the jab. Stipe is a great boxer, and if he can keep the jab out there, it'll do things for him to keep DC at bay, right? Because when DC gets inside, he starts landing his power, and then that's when the takedowns start coming into play. And, Stipe needs to establish his range and not get into that phone booth type of fight, right? But, yeah, man, it's going to be a great matchup, and I like DC. I think DC could potentially get, like I said, the wrestling to me is just such a difference maker, and it's also so exhausting, especially because he only put Stipe through really one round of it, right, in the second fight. But if he could put him through multiple rounds on it, that kind of shit will fucking wear on you, right? Like, no matter what kind of knockout power you have. Look at Ngannou versus Stipe when Stipe wrestle-fucked him. So I like DC because they're both very good, but I like DC's, like I said, I like the avenue that he takes to get inside on guys. And I also think the wrestling is the biggest difference maker in this one. It's not like Stipe has bad takedown defense or like he can't wrestle, but Daniel Cormier is just Olympic fucking level, man. But I think that wraps this one up. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun fight card, and a lot of interesting matchups on this one, man. But yeah, like I said, I think that's everything. So thank you everybody for tuning in. If you're listening to the podcast on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get it, it's also available on YouTube, and obviously vice versa, right? So yeah, thank you guys again, and have a great day. Bye-bye.